In a grand mansion shadowed by silence, a mysterious cry breaks through the stillness, pulling a young woman into a hidden world of pain and hope. What she discovers will change one family forever and reveal the true meaning of courage and connection. Who allowed him to cry like that? Preston Vale's voice thundered through the marble halls, sharp enough to stop the clocks. The piercing sobs had shattered the mansion's silence, and now so had he. Mallory William froze, mid-swipe on a window pane, her damp microfiber cloth lingering in her hand. She'd only been working at the Vale estate for 5 days, assigned to routine cleaning in the East Wing. No one had ever mentioned the 5th floor. In fact, most of the staff steered clear of it, whispering of curses and bad luck. But that sound, the sharp, cyclical sobbing rising again, was impossible to ignore. It wasn't hunger or fatigue or tantrum cries. It was raw panic, a desperate sound clawing from deep inside. "Miss," the butler called from downstairs, "stay clear of the upper wing." Maya didn't answer. Instead, her heart raced as she climbed the final steps. At the end of the long hallway, behind a half-open door, flickering light pulsed from a sensory projector. There, curled on the carpeted floor, was a boy no older than 7. He rocked violently, striking his forehead in rhythm against a bookshelf. No one by his side, no comfort, only relentless pain and repetition. Every instinct screamed at Maya to turn away. But buried deep inside was something older, something she thought she'd left behind. Her younger brother, Jaman, had done the same thing. The same rocking, the same sound, etched in her memory from beneath the dinner table, his arms crossed tight, tears streaming down a face no one could understand. Slowly she stepped inside the room and crouched a few feet away. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, voice barely louder than the boy's cries. "I'm not going to touch you, just sitting right here." No response. But the rocking slowed. Maya kept her hands visible, palms up, then gently traced a simple sign across her chest. A motion of safety. One her grandmother taught her years ago to calm Germain when words failed. The boy glanced at her for a fleeting moment, then resumed his rocking. A harsh voice shattered the fragile quiet. "What the hell are you doing?" Maya spun around to see Preston Vale standing in the doorway, a towering figure of tailored precision and barely contained fury. One hand gripped his phone, the other clenched the doorframe like it might snap. "I'm sorry, sir," Maya said, standing on instinct. "I heard him crying." "And who gave you permission to be in this room?" "No one. I just thought he might be in danger." "Step away from my son." Her muscles stiffened, but she obeyed, stepping aside as Preston approached the boy. The moment he tried to lift him, the child exploded into a scream, louder than before, kicking, clawing, arms flailing in full panic. Preston struggled to hold him, shocked by the intensity. "What's wrong with him?" he muttered. "Why does he—" "May I—" Maya interrupted gently, stepping forward again. Preston didn't stop her. She knelt down, and the instant the boy felt her presence, his screaming eased. He twisted toward her and collapsed into her arms as if he'd been waiting for her all along. His small hands clung tightly to her sleeve. He buried his face into her shoulder. The silence that followed was absolute. If this moment touched your heart, give Maya a like. She didn't fix him with words, but with quiet empathy. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. You might not be the only one feeling this warmth right now. Preston stared, stunned. "How? What did you do?" I didn't do anything, sir," Maya replied softly. "I just listened and signed. I know a little sign language. My brother, he was nonverbal autistic. This used to help calm him." Preston's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. His tailored suit suddenly seemed too tight. The commanding presence from moments ago was now suspended, uncertain. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. Maya William. I clean the East Wing." "You're not a therapist?" "No, sir, just a cleaner." He studied her, watching how naturally she held his son. "Can you stay a little longer today?" Maya nodded, still gently swaying with the boy in her arms. Yes, sir. Preston turned and walked slowly out of the room. For the first time in months, the house fell still. No echoes of pain, no tense footsteps or slammed doors, just a boy and a stranger, now not so strange, wrapped in quiet understanding. Though Preston said nothing, his face told the whole story. Something had shifted, something was beginning. By the time Maya descended the stairs, her back ached from holding the boy so long. She had heard Preston call him Eli. Finally, he drifted to sleep in her arms, his face pressed into the curve of her shoulder, as if he belonged there. Gently, she laid him on a beanbag in the corner of his nursery and covered him with a weighted blanket she'd found folded in the closet. He didn't stir. Now the grand mansion felt heavier than when she first arrived. Each chandelier sparkled but felt cold. Each marble tile underfoot clicked like a reminder. She didn't belong here. She was just a cleaner, a temp no less. And she'd just crossed a boundary no one else dared to touch. She turned toward the service hallway, expecting dismissal, maybe even immediate termination. "Miss Williams." The voice was clipped and clear. She turned to see Preston Vale standing at the corridor's end, arms crossed, expression unreadable. No phone in hand, only a legal pad, the kind that usually signaled official business. Maya straightened, heart sinking. "Yes, sir?" "In my office, please." She nodded and followed him down the long hallway through double doors into an office she'd only dusted from outside. Immaculate, modern, sparsely decorated. Dark wood shelves lined with books bearing uncreased spines. A wall of windows overlooked a private garden. At the far end sat a massive polished oak desk. He gestured to the chair in front of it. "Sit." Maya obeyed, folding her hands in her lap. Preston sat opposite her and was silent for several seconds, tapping a pen against the notepad's edge. Somewhere a grandfather clock ticked in the distance. The atmosphere felt like a courtroom. She wasn't sure if she was witness or accused. "You handled him like someone who's done this 100 times, Preston said finally. "I haven't. With him?" "Just with someone like him." "Your brother?" "Yes, sir. Jermaine. He passed away 4 years ago. He was 10. Preston's eyes flicked up, and for a fleeting moment something human passed across his face. "And I'm sorry." "Thank you." Silence stretched before he leaned back. No therapist, no specialist, no trained professional has been able to calm Eli down, not in 2 years. They all failed. And you just walked in with a rag in your hand and fixed him. Maya's throat tightened. "I didn't fix him, sir. I just saw—" That stopped him. The pen tapping ceased. You saw him." "Children like Eli," she said softly. "They don't need fixing. They need to be heard. You can't rush their silence. You have to be willing to sit in it with them." Preston blinked slowly. "You sound like someone who should be doing more than mopping floors." "I'm just someone who needed a job, sir. My grandmother has medical bills, and this pays better than the diner." He looked down at his notes, then closed the notepad. "I want to make you an offer." Maya blinked. "I need someone who can connect with Eli, someone consistent, not another overqualified stranger with a clipboard and a 2-week contract. Someone he already trusts. I'm not a nanny." "I don't need a nanny. I need you." She shook her head gently, but he didn't let her finish. "With all due respect, I'll double your pay," he said firmly. "You'll stay in the staff wing, in a private room, all expenses covered, weekends off, health insurance if you don't already have it, and you'll never lift a mop again." Maya's heart pounded as the numbers danced through her mind. That kind of money, real money, could mean proper treatment for Grandma Loretta. No more skipped medications, no more stretching every dollar until it cracked. But this was more than a paycheck. This was a fragile boy, tangled in delicate patterns and even more fragile trust. If she accepted and failed, it wouldn't be just another nanny walking away. It would be betrayal. I don't know if I can," Maya admitted, her voice barely steady. Preston leaned forward, elbows resting on his polished desk. "Look, I've had behaviorists with degrees from Stanford, nannies from the best agencies, even a family counselor charging $2,000 an hour. None of them lasted a week. You walked in, said nothing, and my son laid his head on your shoulder. I don't know what that is, but I know it's rare." Maya swallowed hard. "It's not magic, sir, it's just care." She glanced down at her hands, chipped nail polish and all. Care. That rarest gift. She thought of Loretta and the quiet wisdom in her voice. "Baby, if God opens a door, don't stand there arguing about the knob." "When would I start?" Maya asked. "Tomorrow morning. I'll have your room ready tonight." She nodded, determination settling in. "Okay, I'll try." Preston stood and extended his hand. She shook it, small, firm, a promise sealed. As she left the office, her mind spun. She hadn't packed for a live-in job, hadn't told her landlord she'd be gone. But beneath the noise of worry, a quiet feeling stirred, something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The next morning, Maya arrived with a small duffel slung over one shoulder and a cardboard box tucked under her arm. Mrs. Green, the housekeeper, led her to the staff quarters on the east side of the mansion, near the back garden. The room was simple but warm, a twin bed, a cozy reading chair, and a desk facing a window. "Mr. Vale had this redone last night," Mrs. Green said, handing Maya a key card. "Said you were important." "I'm just a helper," Maya replied with a polite smile. "Maybe, but he doesn't give spare rooms to helpers." Maya unpacked quickly, hanging her clothes neatly and placing a small framed photo of Loretta on the nightstand. By 9:30, she stood again outside Eli's nursery. This time he was awake, sitting on the rug, sorting colored blocks into two neat piles. "Morning, Eli," she said softly. He didn't look up, but paused for a heartbeat. She stepped closer and sat cross-legged a few feet away, quiet and unthreatening. Minutes passed. Then, with a gentle nudge of his toe, he pushed a red block toward her. She smiled. "Thanks," and pushed a blue block back. The game had begun. Hours slipped by. No words exchanged, just color, rhythm, repetition. At one point, Maya began to hum softly, a low, familiar gospel melody. Eli didn't protest. In fact, he leaned in slightly, like someone drawn toward a warm fire. From the doorway, Preston watched silently. He wasn't ready to say it aloud, but something about the way Maya sat, still, steady, not forcing or fixing, made his chest ache with a feeling he couldn't yet name. Not fear, not grief. Hope. Later, Maya stood by the nursery window, arms loosely folded, eyes fixed on the garden below. The day had passed more quietly than she expected. No screaming, no frantic outbursts. Eli hadn't spoken, of course. He moved in silence, mostly engaged with wooden puzzles and sorting games she'd laid out, but he'd allowed her to sit closer this time. He hadn't flinched when she hummed under her breath. He'd even touched her sleeve once briefly when she reached across for a blue triangle piece. That single, small touch sparked something cautious, almost sacred inside her, a fragile hope. Soft footsteps approached, and she turned just as Preston entered the nursery. Not in his usual tailored suit, but a white shirt with rolled cuffs and gray slacks. His face was softer around the eyes, less carved by worry. How was he today? His voice was quieter than the sharp bark she'd heard the first day. "Peaceful," Maya said, a faint smile lifting the corners of her lips. No meltdowns, no biting or hitting. He was steady. Preston stepped farther into the room, eyes fixed on Eli, now lying on his stomach, carefully pushing a toy train along its track. "I don't know what you're doing," he muttered, "but it's working." "It's not a trick, Mr. Vale," Maya replied gently. "It's time, presence, and letting him lead." He nodded slowly, as if trying to understand a language he'd never learned. "He used to love trains," Preston said suddenly. "Emmy, my wife, used to take him to the Railroad Museum every other Saturday." Maya glanced at him. Preston's gaze drifted toward the window, distant and heavy. "He hasn't asked to go since she passed," he continued quietly. Not once. She said nothing, letting the silence hold space between them. I thought we were doing okay, Preston admitted. After the funeral, I hired the best therapist money could find, enrolled him in every specialized program that accepted him. I spared nothing. But it only got worse. The tantrums, the fear of strangers, the screaming. He turned back to Maya, voice raw. And now, here you are. And he's calmer than I've seen in over a year. Maya shifted, her voice steady but gentle. Grief isn't something you treat like the flu, Mr. Vale. It's not linear. Not for you. Not for him. Preston was silent for a long moment. Then he asked, "Do you think he remembers her?" "I think he feels her absence," Maya said after a pause, "even if he doesn't know how to say it." He sat down heavily in the armchair by the bookshelf, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on Eli with a mix of guilt and awe. "I was married for 10 years, Preston said suddenly. "We met in college. I was rigid. She was jazz. She laughed too loud, danced barefoot on our balcony in the rain, made breakfast at midnight." Maya smiled softly. "She sounds wonderful." "She was," Preston said, his voice cracking just slightly. Eli looked up briefly and locked eyes with his father. Preston stood and moved slowly toward his son. "Hey, bud," he said softly, crouching beside him. "How's the train coming?" Eli didn't speak or react, but he didn't pull away. Preston looked back at Maya. "You think he'll ever talk again?" "I think he already is," she replied, warmth in her eyes. "You just have to learn to listen to the version of language he trusts." He held his son's gaze a moment longer, then nodded and stood. Later that evening, Maya returned to her modest but comfortable room in the staff wing. She had unpacked her few belongings, 3 changes of clothes, 2 books, a battered journal, and a framed photo of her grandmother Loretta holding young Germaine. She picked up the photo now, running her thumb across the glass. "You'd like him," she whispered. "He's a mess, but he's trying." A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Green. She opened it to find Mrs. Green holding a tray with a covered plate and folded napkin. "Mr. Vale says you haven't eaten since lunch," the older woman said, curiosity in her voice. "He insisted you get a proper dinner." Maya blinked. I didn't realize. I lost track of time. Apparently, so did the boy. He didn't scream at all today. Miracle of miracles." Maya accepted the tray with a grateful smile. "Thank you." Before Mrs. Green left, she lingered. "Don't get too comfortable," she warned softly, but without malice. "Mr. Vale changes moods like the wind." Maya nodded. "I don't expect anything." She closed the door, sat at her desk, and lifted the lid on the plate: grilled salmon, roasted sweet potatoes, and green beans. Her stomach growled softly as she ate, but her mind kept replaying the image of Preston kneeling on the floor beside his son. Brief, vulnerable, real. She couldn't help but wonder. What kind of man tries to control the world but forgets how to hold his child? The next morning, Maya entered Eli's nursery at exactly 8:30. He was already awake, sitting by the window, tracing shapes on the glass with his finger. Warm sunlight spilled across the carpet like a gentle invitation. "Morning, Eli," she whispered, approaching slowly. He didn't turn toward her, but he didn't stiffen either. She sat beside him, careful to respect his space. "Not too close," he seemed to say without words. After a few quiet minutes, Maya pulled out a small whiteboard and a dry erase marker. "I thought we could try something," she said gently. She drew a sun, then a cloud, and handed the marker to him. He stared at the board for a long moment, then slowly took the marker and sketched a crooked heart. Maya smiled, tears prickling behind her eyes. From the hallway, Preston stopped outside the door, watching through the crack in the frame. His hand hovered near the handle but didn't open it. Something inside him was shifting, slowly, painfully, like an old hinge learning to swing again. He turned away before they noticed, but his thoughts stayed in the room. That night, alone in his study, Preston sat with a glass of untouched scotch. On his desk lay a file, Maya Williams' employee application background check, and a handwritten reference letter from her former manager at a diner in Queens. He read the note twice. She's not fancy, but she shows up early, works late, and never complains. She's kind and she knows how to listen, even when people don't know how to talk. Preston folded the paper and leaned back in his chair. Outside, the wind stirred the trees along the stone fence. Inside, for the first time in months, silence felt like comfort, not emptiness. In a house built by money, guarded by rules, and haunted by loss, someone had finally arrived who didn't try to fix the cracks. She simply sat beside them. And for Eli, and maybe for Preston too, that was enough to begin again. Nearly 3 weeks had passed since Maya took the job that wasn't really hers, caring for the boy no one could reach. By now, her presence in the Vale mansion had shifted from anomaly to necessity. Each morning she entered Eli's nursery with the same quiet ritual, no sudden moves, no grand gestures. Just the steady rhythm of showing up. And in return, Eli began to offer more. He still hadn't spoken, not once, but his eyes started seeking her out. He followed her with silent trust. He handed her small things, a block, a button, a puzzle piece, as if they were messages he didn't yet know how to write. That morning, Maya introduced a new routine. She brought in a soft mat, scented clay, and a set of cards painted with bold, cartoonish expressions. "This one's happy," she said, showing the first card. "Happy like when the music plays." Eli touched the card once, then looked up at her face. Slowly, he pressed the card to his chest. "Yeah," she whispered. "That's right." When Preston came home that evening, the house felt different, alive again. Not silent like it had been for the past year, not empty, but humming softly with signs of life. In the kitchen, Mrs. Green played soft jazz from a tablet. The windows were cracked open, letting in a breeze. Somewhere upstairs, a child laughed. Not loud or boisterous, but a quick, pure giggle that stopped Preston in his tracks. He dropped his keys on the hallway console and followed the sound. In the living room, Maya knelt on the carpet, a toy giraffe in one hand and a sock puppet in the other. Eli sat across from her, cross-legged, watching intently as the giraffe and puppet mimed a silly fight over a cup of pretend tea. When the sock puppet dramatically fell over with a squeaky oof, Eli's mouth stretched into a full smile. No sound came, but his whole face lit up. Preston couldn't remember the last time he'd seen that expression. Maya noticed him in the doorway and straightened quickly, brushing lint from her slacks. "Mr. Vale, I didn't hear you come in. He walked in slowly, eyes still on Eli. "Was that him laughing?" She nodded. "Sort of, no sound yet, but he's getting close." Preston crouched beside his son. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. Eli didn't retreat or flinch. He reached out and touched his father's shirt briefly before turning back to the toys. Preston felt his throat tighten. "He's trusting you more," Maya said quietly. Preston nodded but kept his eyes on Eli. He used to play like that with Emmy." She had this ridiculous sock puppet voice he loved. He stood and looked down at Maya. "Thank you." She offered a faint smile, warm eyes meeting his. "I'm not doing anything you couldn't." "That's the part I find hardest to believe," he said, half joking, half defeated. Later that night, Maya wandered to the small garden behind the staff wing. Late spring had brought the first blooms of the azaleas. She carried a mug of tea, her grandmother's blend of cinnamon and dried hibiscus, and settled on a wooden bench beneath a magnolia tree. She breathed deeply. At first, she'd feared her time here would be temporary, that one wrong word, one wrong moment would send her back to mopping floors. But Preston hadn't just tolerated her. He'd started seeking her out. At first about Eli, then about meals, then books, and lately, just conversation. She didn't fool herself into thinking she belonged in his world. He was white, wealthy, powerful, guarded. She was none of those things. But when they talked, truly talked, there was something real, something human. The garden gate creaked behind her. She turned to see Preston standing in the moonlight, holding 2 mugs. I thought you might like chamomile, he said softly. She blinked, surprised. That's very thoughtful. Figured it was either that or more bourbon, he joked. And you don't strike me as a bourbon before bed person. She chuckled. That would put me straight on my back. He sat beside her, not too close. You come out here every night when you can't sleep? They sipped in silence. I've been meaning to ask, he said carefully, voice quieter now, about your brother. What happened? She exhaled slowly. And had a seizure. Complications from an infection. He passed away in the hospital while I was filling out insurance paperwork. Preston looked at her, sincere. I'm sorry. Thank you. Preston was the only person in the world who saw me without expecting anything back. She paused, then said softly, That sounds like Eli. Yeah, Preston agreed. Another pause. He ran a hand through his hair. You make this look easy, but I know it's not. I know I'm difficult, that this house can be cold, that Eli's challenges can be overwhelming. She turned to him. You're not difficult, Mr. Vale. You're just grieving in the only way you know how. His eyes met hers. Call me Preston, please. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, Preston. A gust of wind rustled the branches above them. Lights from the second floor glowed softly through the windows. Somewhere above, Eli stirred in his bed. I want to learn, Preston said suddenly. I want to know what you know. How to reach him. Maya's heartbeat quickened. You're already halfway there. I watch you with him, Preston admitted. The way you read his cues, the way you understand what he needs before he asks. I don't have that instinct. You don't need instinct, she said firmly. You need willingness. And he'll teach you if you're patient enough to listen. He looked at her, and for a moment something shifted between them. I want to try, he said. For the first time, Maya saw not the CEO, not the man of perfect posture and measured words, but a father. Uncertain, flawed, and finally ready. The next day, everything changed. Maya led a small lesson in the living room. Simple sign language. More, stop, help, love. Preston joined them, clumsy but earnest. Eli watched, then copied. At one point, Preston signed more, and Eli responded with a half-formed version of the same gesture. Preston's eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing. He only nodded, smiled, and reached for his son's hand. Later that evening, Maya sat by the window, journal open on her lap, capturing the moment in words. He's coming back to his son, she wrote. Not as a savior, not as a fixer, but as a father learning a new language, one built on silence, trust, and steady hands. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. Preston stood in the doorway holding a book. I found this in Emma's things, he said quietly. It's about parenting children with sensory disorders. I thought maybe we could read it together. She took it gently, warmth rising in her chest. I'd like that. And before he turned away, he added, Thank you for staying. That night, Maya sat on her bed, the book resting in her lap, the memory of Germaine glowing softly inside her. She wasn't just staying, she was building something. Slowly. Quietly, like Eli's laughter, like trust blooming between unlikely hands. Early summer light streamed through the nursery windows, casting golden beams onto the wooden floor. Maya sat cross-legged across from Eli, gently encouraging him to press different animal shapes into a soft patch of kinetic sand. It was their morning ritual now, sensory time before breakfast. A calm, consistent way to ease him into the day. Eli still didn't speak, but he responded more with each passing moment. Eye contact, small gestures, even tentative smiles. When Maya sang softly, he swayed. When she laughed, he tilted his head to watch her longer. Once, when she reached for a sand mold he liked, he touched her wrist and pushed it gently toward her. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't answer, but his fingers brushed her palm in reply. Preston had started joining these sessions 3 times a week. He no longer lingered in the background, arms folded and unreadable. Now he knelt beside his son, mimicking Maya's gestures, learning the signs slowly but with deep focus. Cow, Maya signed that morning, shaping horns with her fingers. Eli didn't copy, but he stared intently, then pointed to a small cow figure on the mat, and pressed it into the sand with surprising care. Preston laughed quietly, genuinely. "He's getting it," he said. Maya smiled, then turned to him. "So are you." That afternoon, Preston invited her to walk the garden with him after lunch. Eli had fallen asleep in the sunroom, a blanket loosely wrapped around him and a stuffed bear held tight in one hand. Maya hesitated, unsure if this was still professional, but followed him out past manicured hedges toward the old gazebo. They walked slowly, side by side. Preston had removed his jacket and loosened his collar. The first time she'd seen him without that ever-present armor. "Eli's therapist called this morning," Maya said quietly. Preston nodded. "I didn't mention it earlier because I wanted to see how today went." Maya looked up. "Is everything all right?" "His developmental milestones are still delayed," she said, but she noted significant behavioral improvements. "He's beginning to trust again." "That takes more than therapy," Maya added softly. "That takes safety." Preston nodded, hands shoved into his pockets. She also asked what changed at home. "I told her it was you." Maya chuckled, brushing a braid behind her ear. "I'm just one part of it." He stopped walking and turned toward her. "You're the part that matters." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment the world seemed to narrow, the breeze slowed, the bird's song faded. Preston's expression was different now. Not the guarded, clipped detachment she'd come to expect, but something quieter, raw. "Before Emma died," he began, voice rougher than usual, "she said I was always 2 steps behind. That I never saw what was in front of me until it was too late." Maya said nothing, only listened. "She handled everything," he went on, "the school forms, the therapy sessions, the tantrums. I just wrote the checks." He swallowed hard. "And when she got sick, I panicked. I started controlling everything, as if order could save her, as if structure could replace her presence." "Grief makes us grasp at anything that doesn't move," Maya said gently, "because what moves might disappear." Preston looked at her sharply, surprised, then slowly nodded. "You speak like someone who's lost something." "Someone who's lost someone," she corrected softly, barely a whisper. "We all carry echoes." They continued walking in silence. Shadows stretched across the garden. Maya reached out and touched a blooming camellia. "These used to grow outside my grandmother's porch," she murmured. "She said they were stubborn flowers, that they bloomed when they wanted, not when others expected." "Sounds familiar," Preston said. She smiled. "I suppose it does." That evening, as the sun dipped low and Eli napped on the couch, Maya found herself in the study. Preston had invited her to review an old therapy binder he'd found in the closet, notes and videos from Eli's earliest sessions. Emma had filmed everything. Handing her a USB drive, she'd always said, "One day we'll forget the hard parts and miss the details. Let's save the details." Maya sat at the desk, opening the folder on the screen. The first video began to play. A much younger Eli, maybe 4 years old, sat at a low table with a therapist. Emma's gentle voice narrated from behind the camera, coaching Preston on using signs for eat, sleep, and mom. Maya watched silently as the video continued. In one clip, Eli reached toward Preston and clumsily signed love. Emma's laughter followed softly. "That's your daddy, baby. Good job." Maya turned slightly in her chair to see Preston standing in the doorway. He didn't answer, just watched. His face had gone pale. "I forgot about that video," he said. "I haven't watched these since before the funeral." "She was good with him," Maya said softly. "She was everything," he replied, voice cracking just a little. "And I erased her." Maya stood and walked slowly toward him. "No, you didn't. You were surviving. You were breaking open in silence." Preston looked down at her. Is that what I was doing? He nodded. And tomorrow, I want to show you something. Something personal. She tilted her head. It's not far? Just something I haven't shared in a long time about Emma. The mention of his late wife made the air still. Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm. You don't have to. I want to, he said firmly. You've given so much to our home. I want you to know where this all began. That evening, dinner was simple but meaningful. Grilled salmon, asparagus, mashed sweet potatoes. Maya cooked. Preston set the table. Eli picked out a napkin for everyone, handing Maya a blue one, himself a red, and his father a yellow. It was the first time Maya had seen him make a deliberate choice that included her. After dinner, they settled by the fireplace. Preston poured each a glass of wine, Maya's just half, as she preferred. I used to sit right here with Emma, he said quietly, voice low, this exact spot. When we first bought the house, we couldn't afford to furnish most of it, but we had this fireplace and a second-hand record player. He smiled, eyes distant. She used to sing to Eli every night, even when he wouldn't respond. Even when the silence felt endless, she never gave up on him. Maya's throat tightened. You remind me of her, he said suddenly. Not because you're similar, but because you love with the same stubborn depth. She looked at him, surprised. I'm not saying that lightly. There was a pause. The fire crackled. I don't know where this is going, he admitted. But I know what I feel when you're near. And I know how Eli changes around you. She looked down, heart racing. Do you feel it too? He asked. Maya met his gaze. Yes. But I'm scared. So am I. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Later that night, Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her room was small, modest, tucked at the back of the house, but it was hers for now. A knock came at the door. She rose, heart fluttering, and opened it. It was Preston, not in a suit, not in armor, just him. I couldn't sleep, he said. Me neither. He didn't step inside or reach for her. He just looked at her like she mattered. I just wanted to say thank you for helping me find him, for helping me find myself. She smiled softly. Good night, Preston. Good night, Maya. And he walked away. She closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling long and deep. It wasn't love yet, but it was something real. And that was how everything truly began. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of Maya's room, casting soft golden shapes across the floorboards. She lay in bed longer than usual, eyes open, heart beating with a strange calm. The memory of Preston's voice from the night before lingered in the silence. It hadn't been a confession. Not exactly, but something deeper. An invitation into a truth they were both still learning to name. By the time she made her way to the kitchen, the house was already stirring. Eli sat at the island counter, sipping from a plastic cup of orange juice, while Preston leaned over a skillet attempting scrambled eggs. Maya paused in the doorway, watching the two of them, father and son, side by side, like a picture from a long-overdue family album. Preston noticed her first. Good morning, he said with a warm smile, wearing a navy t-shirt and jeans instead of his usual crisp button-down. Eli turned, spotted Maya, and his eyes brightened. He didn't say a word, but he reached out his hand toward her. It was the first time he'd initiated contact. Maya crossed the room and took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Good morning, sweetheart, she whispered. Preston looked on, the corner of his mouth twitching in quiet awe. I was thinking we could take Eli to the park today, he said. There's one not far from here, Piedmont Park. I haven't taken him out in a while, but I feel like maybe it's time. Maya blinked, surprised. That's a big step. I know. But I want to try. The outing wasn't planned with perfection, and that was part of its charm. Maya packed a small bag with snacks and wipes. Preston brought a blanket and a collapsible stroller. Eli wore a baseball cap and refused to take it off. The car ride was quiet but peaceful, with soft jazz playing low, and the city slowly unfolding through the windows. Piedmont Park was alive with spring. Children laughing, couples walking dogs, old men reading newspapers on benches. They found a spot beneath a tall oak tree and laid out the blanket. Preston sat with Eli, pointing out ducks on the lake, while Maya unpacked sliced apples and cheese crackers. Eli didn't say much, but his eyes followed everything. He watched a group of boys playing catch nearby, his gaze lingering longer than usual. "Would you like to try, Eli?" Preston asked gently, nodding toward the game. He looked at Maya, his expression uncertain. She smiled. "Well, just watch for now, okay? Maybe next time." He seemed content with that, curling up beside her and munching on a cracker. A few minutes later, a voice called out from across the field. "Mr. Caldwell, is that you?" Preston looked up. A woman in her early 40s approached, dressed in running gear and sunglasses. "Rebecca Thorne," she said, extending her hand. "We met at the Chamber of Commerce dinner last year." Preston stood, polite but guarded. "Ah, yes, of course, good to see you." Rebecca glanced at Maya, then down at Eli. "This must be your son, I heard. Well, I'm glad to see he's doing okay." Maya felt the tone shift slightly, subtle but unmistakable. That quick assessment, that flicker of surprise at Maya's presence beside them. Rebecca's eyes didn't linger, but her smile tightened. "Your new nanny?" Preston's spine straightened. "This is Maya William. She's part of our family." Rebecca blinked. "Oh, well, that's nice." She turned back to Eli, then back at Preston. "Listen, I don't want to intrude. Just wanted to say hello. We should catch up sometime. I'll send you a message." With that, she jogged off. Maya pretended to focus on Eli's snack, but felt heat creep up her neck. Preston sat back down beside her, silent for a moment. "I'm sorry about that," he said softly. "You don't have to be." "No," he insisted, turning to her. "You deserve more than to be seen as just someone who works for me." Maya met his eyes. "I don't need validation from strangers, Preston. I know who I am." His expression softened. "I wish everyone had your clarity." They spent another hour in the park, letting Eli explore the grass, listen to bird songs, and gather small rocks like treasure. When it was time to leave, he didn't cry. He held Maya's hand and walked beside her all the way to the car. That evening, as twilight deepened over the estate, Preston stood by the window in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Maya knocked gently on the door. "Come in." She stepped inside, pausing at the threshold. "Eli's asleep, thank you." He gestured for her to sit. "There's something I want to show you." He opened a drawer and pulled out a worn photo album. Maya moved closer and sat beside him on the leather sofa. The album smelled faintly of old paper and lavender. "This," he said, opening to the first page, "was Emma's idea. She started it when we first found out we were pregnant. Every month a new photo, every milestone. And then after she passed, I stopped adding to it. The photos were beautiful. Emma's glowing smile, baby Eli bundled in blankets, tiny footprints pressed in ink. As they turned the pages, the images faded, not physically but emotionally. "This is the last one," Preston said, pointing to a photo of Emma holding Eli under a maple tree. Her face radiant despite the IV taped to her arm just 2 weeks before she died. Maya ran her fingers gently along the plastic sleeve. "I'll ever again." "She loved him so much." "She did," Preston whispered. "And I failed her. I shut down, buried myself in work, in meetings, in pretending grief wasn't eating me alive. You were surviving." Preston turned to her. "You're helping me live." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. "I've been thinking," he said after a moment. "I want to formally hire you not just as a housemaid or caretaker, but as Eli's developmental guide. We'll set up training, a plan. I'll make it official." Maya blinked. "That's generous." "It's not generosity," he said firmly. "It's necessity. You've done more for him than any therapist or specialist in the last 2 years." She nodded slowly. "I'll accept," she said, "on one condition." "Name it." "That we keep doing this together, as a team. No titles, no distance." He held her gaze. Theo. They sat there, the photo album open between them. Two people bound by loss, and something slowly growing beyond it. Just before she left the room, Preston called her name. Maya. She turned. He stood, walked toward her, and then, without rushing, pulled her into an embrace. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was something older, deeper, a recognition that said, I see you. And in the quiet safety of that moment, Maya finally allowed herself to believe she belonged. The next morning began with an unexpected knock, not gentle, but sharp, echoing, a sound that stirred both tension and memory. Maya was in the kitchen preparing Eli's favorite oatmeal when she heard it. Preston appeared seconds later, his brow creased before he reached the door. Standing outside was a man in a tailored gray suit, clipboard tucked under his arm. He wasn't alone. Two others flanked him, one in business casual, the other in a sharp blazer with an earpiece. The insignia on the clipboard read, Child Welfare Services. Mr. Caldwell, the man asked, polite but firm. Preston nodded slowly. Yes. What's this about? I'm Marcus Fielding. We received a report of possible neglect concerning your son Elijah Caldwell. We're here for an assessment. For a moment, only the wind rustled through the trees. Maya stepped into the hallway, holding Eli close against her hip. She felt his little heart pounding through her blouse. Preston stepped outside, pulling the door halfway closed behind him. This is absurd. Who filed this report? I'm afraid we're not permitted to disclose the source during the initial evaluation, Marcus replied. May we come in? No, Preston said calmly, but with unmistakable storm beneath. Not until I speak to my attorney. You have every right to contact legal counsel, Marcus said. However, if you deny entry during a welfare check, we'll need to escalate. A court order can be requested. Maya stepped forward, still holding Eli, who clutched her tighter. He's safe, she said steadily. I've been with him every day. There's no neglect. Marcus studied her. And you are Maya Williams? I've been working here for several months. I'm his full-time caregiver. Another agent jotted something into a notebook. Preston exhaled sharply through his nose. Give me 5 minutes. He returned inside and made 2 calls, first to his lawyer, then to the head of a private security firm. When he came back, he opened the door fully. You may enter, he said, but you do so under observation. Nothing is to be touched without consent. They stepped inside, eyes scanning the foyer like it was a crime scene. Maya held Eli protectively, whispering to him in a soft rhythm only he understood. Preston stayed close, his body language sharp and restrained. The agents conducted their assessment quietly, checking the pantry, nursery, backyard. One agent asked to speak with Eli alone. Maya declined on his behalf. He doesn't speak with strangers. He has autism. I'm his comfort. His voice. You can ask and I'll translate in sign if needed. Noted, Marcus said, scribbling. They found nothing. Of course, there was nothing to find. But just before they left, Marcus turned back. This visit was protocol. But off the record, Mr. Caldwell, it's rare we see a child this well cared for. Whoever sent the complaint may have had other motivations. Preston closed the door behind them, jaw tight. Maya stood nearby, still holding Eli, who had fallen asleep from the tension. Someone's trying to get to us, she said softly. Preston nodded. I think I know who. He didn't name names. He didn't have to. Later that afternoon, Preston called a meeting in his home office. The guest list was small. Maya, his attorney, Sandra Griffin, and a security advisor named Lionel Hatch, a calm, silver-haired man with decades in federal protection services. This isn't random, Preston began. We've been facing resistance on the upcoming tech acquisition, silent pressure. Now this. I want a full background check on everyone who's had access to my family's internal calendar. Sandra looked up from her notes. You think it was an internal leak? I think it was personal, Preston said, glancing at Maya. Targeted, Lionel tapped the table. Start the sweep, phones, laptops, digital footprints. If someone tried to weaponize child welfare, We'll find the source. When the meeting ended, Maya lingered behind. Preston looked at her. You don't have to stay involved in this. Yes, I do, she said firmly. This isn't just your fight now, it's Eli's, and I'm not going anywhere. His eyes flickered. You always speak like someone who's lost something important. Maya exhaled. I have. But Eli isn't going to be one of those things. He didn't respond, but he didn't need to. That night, after dinner, Maya sat on the porch swing with Eli nestled against her. The stars began to twinkle one by one, lighting the sky like old truths finally being revealed. Preston joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. Mind if I sit? She moved over, and he took the space beside her, close but not imposing. I used to think silence was a curse, he said. That quiet meant something was broken. But I'm starting to understand there are different kinds of silence. She looked at him. There's the silence of grief, he continued, the silence of shame, and then there's the kind that's safe, like right now. Maya held her tea carefully. Safe silence, that's rare. He nodded, sipping. You've given that to him, to me too. They sat in the silence a long while, the night deepening around them. Then Preston asked, have you ever thought about what it would mean if Eli could talk, not just with his hands, but with words? Maya looked out into the dark yard. Sometimes. But I think about what he already says, in other ways. When he takes my hand, when he leans into me without asking. That's speaking, it's just a different language. Preston's voice was quiet. You're teaching me to listen to that language. And then, like a whisper from the wind, a new voice cut through the quiet. Small, hesitant. Mama. Maya froze. Preston looked down. Eli, half asleep, had shifted. His lips formed the syllable again. Mama. It was no longer imagined, no longer a dream. Preston's eyes widened. Maya's hands trembled. Her breath caught in her chest. Billy, what did you say? The boy blinked slowly. His eyes fluttered, then closed again. Preston turned to Maya. Did you hear that? I did, she whispered, voice breaking. I did. It was the first word he'd spoken aloud in nearly 2 years. Preston didn't speak for a full minute. Then he reached for her hand, no hesitation, no pretense. We're going to protect him, he said, voice steady now. Whoever came after us, they won't get another chance. Maya nodded, tears finally slipping free. The porch lights flickered gently above them, casting a warm glow on the 3 of them seated on that old swing. A step closer to healing. 1 word closer to a future none of them had dared to imagine. But the morning brought no calm. The house stood still, yet beneath its quiet surface was a tension, thick and palpable, an invisible shift in the air. Preston rose earlier than usual, heading straight to the gym. He struck the punching bag with a fury that wasn't born of physical exertion, but of something deeper, unresolved. Maya awoke to the muffled thuds echoing faintly down the hall. She slipped out of bed and checked on Eli first. Curled beneath the quilt, his breathing soft and even, his small arm cradling the stuffed bear she'd mended just last week. The miracle still echoed in her chest. That voice, the word he'd spoken. Mama. It hadn't been loud, but it had been real. Downstairs, Maya brewed coffee, the warm scent curling through the kitchen like a small gesture of normalcy. By the time Preston returned, sweat-drenched and silent, she handed him a mug without a word. He took it, their fingers brushed. He paused too long. Thanks, he said, voice low. Didn't sleep much, Maya replied gently. He stared into his cup, then asked, Has he said anything this morning? She shook her head. But it wasn't a dream. I know what I heard. If you do. I do, he said quietly, exhaling slowly. But that also means whoever came after us knows how close he's getting, and they might try again. Maya's expression sharpened. Let them try. Preston gave her a look, half surprised, half grateful. You're braver than most people I know. I'm not brave, she said firmly. I'm protective. That's different. They sat across from each other. Calm before a storm they both sensed was coming. Minutes later, Lionel Hatch arrived, file under arm, his face unreadable. "I have something," he said as he entered Preston's study. "I ran cross-checks on all communications from this property over the past 60 days. There's a match." Preston leaned forward. Maya remained standing, arms folded tightly. "Someone accessed your schedule through a side channel, an old assistant with limited database clearance." Preston frowned. "Thank you, Sylvia. Warner," Lionel finished. "Terminated 6 months ago, but someone forgot to revoke her cloud-level access. And guess who she's now working for?" Maya's jaw clenched. "Let me guess. Lark Technologies." Lionel nodded. "And not just working, she's engaged to their COO." Preston slammed his fist onto the desk. So this wasn't just corporate, it was personal. They knew how to hit where it hurt through Eli. "Exactly. The welfare report was just the opening move," Lionel added. "But there's more. They filed a quiet injunction, claiming your acquisition of one of their subsidiaries involved coercion." "That's absurd," Preston snapped. "They're playing dirty," Maya said, eyes narrowing. "And they're using Eli to rattle you?" "Not just me," Preston replied. "Us." Lionel leaned in. "There's one move left, sir. You file a countermeasure, bring all of this into the light. But it comes with risks. They'll dig into everything, including Maya." She looked up. "I don't have anything to hide." Preston stood. "And even if she did, it wouldn't matter. She's family now. I'm not letting them drag her name through the mud." Maya's breath caught. He hadn't said those words like that before. Her eyes searched his face, seeking truth or just protection. He held her gaze with quiet certainty. "I'm going to make the call. We take them to court. Publicly." By late afternoon, news began trickling through press channels. Caldwell Dynamics had filed a countersuit against Lark Technologies, citing defamation, emotional trauma, and abuse of government agencies for personal gain. Maya watched from the guest room, Eli asleep beside her. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, messages from friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Some supportive, some confused, others hostile. One stood out, a private number. "I know what you are. He'll find out too. You don't belong there." She stared at the message, hands trembling. Preston found her 20 minutes later. Her expression told him everything. He didn't ask. He simply took her phone and scrolled. When he saw the message, his jaw tightened. "This has to stop," he said. She looked up. "They're not after you, they're after me, because they can't touch me without touching you first." Silence hung between them. Then Preston said, "Come with me." He led her down the hall to the family room, where a fire burned low and soft jazz played in the background. Eli stirred on the couch, blinking sleepily. Preston knelt beside him and began signing slowly. Maya watched, surprised. His signs were clumsy but sincere. "Safe, Daddy. Love. Maya." Eli's face lit up with a small smile. Preston turned to Maya. "I've been learning quietly," he said, "because if I'm going to be the father he needs, I can't wait for someone else to teach me." She didn't speak, not at first. Her throat tightened too much. When she found her voice, it was soft. "You're already becoming that." That night, Lionel's team set up a surveillance grid around the estate. Drones, motion sensors, secured perimeter alarm. No one would come near unnoticed again. But the storm wasn't just outside. It was in headlines, whispers, anonymous online comments. Maya became a quiet lightning rod, praised by some, vilified by others. Rumors swirled. Gold digger, seductress, manipulator of a vulnerable child. Preston tried to shield her, issuing statements, standing by her side at every press conference. But some shadows can't be chased away by words. One night, after a cruel article called her the maid who would be queen, Maya sat alone on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket. Preston joined her quietly, handing her a cup of tea. "I used to think I could fix everything with money," he said. "Turns out the things that matter most can't be bought. They have to be fought for." She sipped, eyes red. Do you think it'll ever stop? He looked at her, numberless. But I think we'll get stronger together. Her voice cracked. Do you ever regret bringing me into all this? He didn't answer with words. He reached over, took her hand, and placed it over his heart. No, he said simply, because you brought me back to mine. Tears filled her eyes, this time not from hurt, but from hope. That night, in the hush of a house on the edge of scandal, the three of them, Preston, Maya, and Ellie, slept beneath the same roof with something new. A sense of family. Fragile, earned, and real. The courtroom was colder than expected, a stark contrast to the heat simmering beneath Maya's skin. She sat quietly beside Preston at the defense table, hands folded tightly in her lap, breath steady but shallow. Cameras clicked, murmurs stirred as reporters filled every available seat. This wasn't just a hearing, it was a spectacle. Judge Adeline Monroe entered, a woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled tightly into a bun. Her presence was commanding but not cruel. Her gavel echoed with finality. This court will now hear Caldwell Dynamics versus Lark Technologies, she announced, voice unwavering. Maya's eyes flicked to the opposing side. Sylvia Warner sat smugly in the front row, her engagement ring catching light like a trophy. Beside her was Greg Sinclair, COO of Lark, cold, calculating, convinced everything was a negotiation. They barely glanced at Maya, treating her role as ornamental at best. But she wasn't here to be overlooked. Not anymore. Preston leaned over and whispered, "They're expecting you to flinch. Don't give them that satisfaction." She gave a tight nod. Her fingers trembled, but her heart did not. The testimonies began. Legal jargon filled the air. Arguments over data access, unauthorized schedule leaks, weaponizing welfare systems. Lionel Hatch took the stand, delivering his findings with clinical precision. He outlined the digital trail, the unrevoked access, the links between Sylvia and Lark Technologies. The court listened, but tension didn't truly rise until Maya's name was mentioned. And what role did Ms. Maya William play in any of these corporate decisions? The opposing attorney's voice was sharp, dripping with condescension. Lionel answered calmly, "None. She was a house staff member. Her only concern was the safety of the child." "Ah, then why," the attorney pressed, "did she continue to involve herself in matters far beyond her professional scope?" Before Lionel could respond, Judge Monroe raised a hand. "Ms. William, are you prepared to testify today?" Maya froze for a heartbeat. Preston glanced at her. "It's your call." She stood slowly, legs steady despite the pounding in her chest. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm ready." The courtroom shifted, every eye fixed on her. As she approached the stand, Sylvia smirked, but Maya met her gaze without flinching. Under oath, Maya recounted the story. She spoke of finding Eli, the silent moments between them, the boy who hadn't spoken for years. She told of learning his signs, the night of the fake welfare call, the terror in Eli's eyes when strangers entered their home. "And did Mr. Caldwell instruct you to act beyond your duties?" the Lark attorney asked, leaning forward. "No," Maya replied firmly, "but I chose to protect that boy. I would do it again." Where would a housekeeper insert herself into such a delicate situation? The implication hung heavy in the air, an insult wrapped in a question. Maya's voice did not waver. "Because that little boy wasn't just frightened. He was forgotten. And I know what that feels like." The courtroom quieted. Even Sylvia's smirk slipped. Maya continued, "I grew up in a system that never noticed when I went hungry or when my sister couldn't hear and no one bothered to learn how to talk to her. I promised myself if I ever saw that look in another child's eyes, I wouldn't walk away." Judge Monroe regarded her carefully. "Thank you, Miss William. You may step down." As Maya returned to her seat, Preston gave her hand the slightest squeeze beneath the table. "You were remarkable," he whispered. She didn't smile. "Not yet. The fight isn't over." Outside, the courthouse steps overflowed with press. Reporters shouted questions about her relationship with Preston, rumors of financial motives and her background. Maya kept her chin high, answering none. Preston placed a protective hand on her back as they walked to the car. Inside, silence settled, until Maya finally asked, "Do you regret putting me on that stand?" He turned to her. "Not even for a second. You are the most truthful person in that courtroom. But they'll twist it, they always do." "Then let them twist," Preston said. "You don't bend." That evening, back at the estate, Eli sat with Maya in the sunroom. Quiet, hands resting on his knees, gaze distant. She signed slowly. "Are you okay?" He hesitated, then signed back. "I heard them say bad things." Maya knelt beside him. "They don't know you. They don't know us." Eli nodded, then added in halting fingers, "You're still here." Her heart broke open a little. "I'll always be here." Across the room, Preston watched the exchange. Later that night, he invited her into his office. There, on the desk, sat a thick, embossed document. "What is this?" she asked. "My will," he said plainly. "I'm naming you guardian if anything happens to me." "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't talk like that." "I have to," he insisted. "They're not just attacking my business. They're coming after my soul, and my soul lives in that boy." She swallowed hard. "And what if they find something on me? What if they dig too deep?" "Then let them," he said quietly, "because you've already proven something more powerful than any background check." "What's that?" "That you love him." There was no romance in his tone, no dramatic flair, just truth. And sometimes, that's the most beautiful thing. Later that week, the ruling came through. The court found insufficient evidence for Lark Technologies' allegations and dismissed the case with prejudice. But it was the judge's final remarks that silenced the crowd. "I find it deeply disturbing," Judge Monroe said, "that a private corporation would manipulate child welfare systems for corporate gain. Miss Williams's actions reflect the highest moral standard, one we would do well to emulate. This court recognizes her not just as a witness, but as a protector." The room erupted in whispers. Sylvia's face blanched. Greg Sinclair stood and walked out before the gavel even fell. Outside, the press swarmed Maya again. But this time the questions were softer. Some even kind. "How does it feel to be vindicated? Will you stay with the Caldwell family?" Preston stepped forward, shielding her. But Maya didn't retreat. She turned to the cameras, eyes steady. "I didn't do this to win," she said firmly. "I did it because a little boy needed someone who wouldn't leave." That night at home, the quiet was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of something sacred. Eli fell asleep beside her on the couch, his small hand curled gently in hers. Preston stood by the doorway, watching them both with a look that needed no explanation. Family wasn't always made by blood. Sometimes it was chosen in the middle of chaos. Sometimes it was proven in a courtroom. And sometimes it was simply a hand held through the storm, refusing to let go. The following morning carried a stillness that felt unfamiliar. Not the quiet of uncertainty, but the calm that follows a long, punishing storm. Sunlight spilled through the estate's tall windows, warming the marble floors that once felt cold, sterile. Now the house seemed alive, not with noise, but with peace. Maya stood at the kitchen counter, making pancakes from scratch. Eli sat on a stool nearby, still in his pajamas, watching her with the soft gaze of a child who finally felt safe. He didn't speak, rarely did, but he signed one word with gentle fingers. "Happy." Maya's chest tightened. She turned to him and signed back, "Me too." Behind them, Preston entered quietly, a cup of coffee in hand, tie hanging loosely around his neck. His presence no longer carried the guarded stiffness of a corporate titan. Now there was a softness in his eyes Maya hadn't seen before. "Smells like you're trying to spoil him," he teased lightly. She gave him a wry smile. If he's going to start his day watching the morning news talk about his dad, he deserves pancakes. Preston glanced sideways at the muted television in the corner, where a live interview played. One of the anchors read headlines off a prompter. "Caldwell family scandal ends with unexpected hero. The housemaid who stood against a corporation." The boy who spoke through silence. "They're not going to let this go any time soon," he muttered. "I know," Mia replied, flipping a pancake. "But we don't need them to." Eli giggled as the pancake landed perfectly in the pan. Such a simple sound, so small, but it carried weight. It was joy. And in this house, joy had been rare. Later that day, a letter arrived by private courier. Hand-delivered, sealed in a cream-colored envelope addressed to Maya. Her brows furrowed as she opened it carefully. Preston watched her from the library doorway. "Something wrong?" She unfolded the letter, eyes scanning the handwritten lines, then blinked in disbelief. "It's from Judge Monroe," she whispered. "She's offering to nominate me for the state's Child Welfare Advisory Board." Preston stepped forward, startled. "That's significant." "She says she believes my experience, personal and professional, could help shape future policies." Maya didn't answer immediately. Her fingers tightened around the paper. "It's not just about Eli, is it? It's bigger than him. There are more kids like him out there." Preston nodded solemnly. "And not enough people willing to fight for them." For the first time since this ordeal began, Maya saw beyond the mansion, beyond Eli. She saw a path, a purpose, not to escape who she was, but to become more of it. That afternoon, the three of them drove to a modest community center on the edge of the city. The building was old but clean, its faded blue doors welcoming. Maya had learned about it through one of the lawyers at the trial. An after-school program for children with disabilities, mostly underfunded and understaffed. Inside, children sat in circles, some drawing, others using tablets with assistive communication. One young boy, maybe 7, struggled with his hands, trying to form letters in the air. Maya knelt beside him and gently guided his fingers. "Like this," she said softly, signing the word home. He repeated it, a smile stretching wide as he got it right. Preston stood in the doorway, Eli beside him holding his hand. Neither said a word, but their expressions were identical. Awe, admiration, and something tender. When they left, the director of the center followed Maya out. "If you ever want to volunteer or teach, our doors are open." She paused, then looked down at Eli, who was now signing to Preston. "I think I'd like that." That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls in hues of gold, Maya sat alone in the garden. The scent of blooming jasmine drifted through the air, mingling with the distant sound of wind chimes. She held Judge Monroe's letter in one hand, her phone in the other. She finally called someone she hadn't spoken to in years, her mother's sister, Aunt Lorraine. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Maya, sweetheart." Her throat tightened. "Hi, I just wanted to hear your voice." "Oh, baby, I saw you on the news. I told your cousins, that girl right there, that's my niece, Maya William, and she's got more courage in her little finger than most people have in their whole body." Maya blinked away tears. "Didn't think I'd come this far." "Well, you did, and your mama would be proud." They talked for nearly an hour. Laughter returned. Pain surfaced. But so did healing. By the time they said goodbye, Maya felt a piece of herself return. One she hadn't known was lost. Later that night, Maya walked into the nursery. Eli was already tucked into bed, a small nightlight glowing beside him. She leaned down, kissed his forehead, and turned to leave. "Wait," he whispered. She turned, startled. It was the first word he had spoken aloud in months. He pointed at her and whispered again. "Stay." Maya blinked, swallowed the lump in her throat, and sat beside him. He reached for her hand and closed his eyes. Downstairs, Preston stood at the foot of the staircase, listening. When Maya finally joined him, his eyes searched hers. "You okay?" "I'm more than okay," she said. "I feel whole." Preston hesitated. "There's something I want to ask." She tilted her head. "I know this isn't how things usually go, and I don't want to rush anything, but I'd like you to stay, not just as staff, but as family." Maya's breath caught. "Oh, Preston, I'm not asking for answers tonight. I just wanted you to know that no matter what title the world gives you, maid, witness, advocate, you've already become something far more important to me." She looked away, heart pounding. This was never about love. No, he agreed. It was about truth. "But sometimes," she whispered, "when the truth is finally safe, love follows." In the weeks that followed, Maya accepted the judge's nomination. She joined advocacy circles, traveled with Preston and Eli to community meetings, and began designing inclusive curricula for schools. Her story spread quietly and respectfully, not as a fairy tale, but as a reminder that sometimes it's not the powerful who change the world. It's the ones who dare to care when no one else will. One spring morning, nearly a year later, a framed photo sat on Preston's office desk. It showed Maya and Eli sitting beneath a tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves, both laughing with abandon. Above the image, in small engraved letters, it read, "Family is the place where the storm breaks." And beneath it a simple quote from Maya herself. "Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up and staying." Thank you for sharing this story with us. It reminds us that kindness and compassion, those small, quiet acts, have the power to heal, to bring justice, and to change lives in ways we might never imagine. In a world that often feels divided, it's these moments of humanity that light the way forward. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing so we can continue to bring you more stories of hope and resilience. Remember, sometimes the smallest gesture can create the biggest ripple. Until next time, keep kindness alive in your world.